My name is Annette Fisher, and I'm the chair of Let's Build, partner of FA Global, and I've got my two speakers, Teri Okoro and Roy MacPepple. Now, I'll first of all just introduce our guests. Dr. Teri Okoro is an RIBA fellow. She's a chartered project professional and inclusion champion, is founder and director of TOCA, RIBA chartered practice. She sits on the diversity and inclusion panel of the Construction Industry Council, is an expert advisor to Historic England, and has been delivering the RIBA 2020 seminars on diversity and inclusion. Her previous roles include being a non-executive director within the NHS and also a leading London housing association. Teri, if you could just make a little wave so everybody knows who you are. There you go. And then we've got Roy MacPepple. He is founder and chair of NHPDC, a think tank of award-winning consultants, contractors, manufacturers, developers, and funders for delivering more new best practice, sustainable zero carbon homes using modern methods of construction. Roy has worked for over 30 years in the local authority built environment sector. He's been a non-executive director of development and assets for housing associations and a council ALMO. He's also an advocate of using the Social Values Act 2012 local plans and procurement process to increase appointment of more BAME consultants and contractors. Now, we have a very simple format for this afternoon. Oh, sorry, and please wave, Roy. Yes, that's so we know who you are. There you go, Roy. We've got a very simple setup. We're going to play a couple of presentations, first one by Teri and then by Roy. And then we will have a Q&A session. And we'd like you to please type in any questions that you've got for our panelists. So with that, I'll just play these recordings. I'll just share the screen. One moment. Share the screen.
The COVID pandemic has impacted Black lives and the Black community more adversely than others. But it will be pertinent, let's take a step back and look at what the context was before COVID. And the existing context was already one of disadvantage and inequality, and this was at several levels, and there are indicators to provide evidence for this. When we look at something like education and educational outcome, but also looking at employment, access to employment, and it wasn't just to do with people's educational qualifications, it was the barriers which they faced, but also the income for the Black and minority community was lower on average than the general population. The rules which they were able to undertake were rules which paid less income and were more public-facing roles. They were less likely to be in leadership. Income also impacted access to housing, and many people having to rent and not able to own their homes. These homes were largely located in inner cities and polluted areas. We know that the Black community is not evenly distributed in the UK. We make up 13% of the population, but when you view large cities like London and Birmingham, the Black and minority population are well over 40%. So we are located largely in the conurbations. When we look at architecture more specifically, there's not been so much difference from the general population. Let's look at education, for instance. Part 1, 5.2% of students intake in the 2017 Rebus survey were from Black and minority communities. In that same year, when you look at people who were taking the Part 3 exams. That was 2.7%. So you can see that there's been a like 50% drop in between people starting Part 1 and people undertaking Part 3. And this is an awful lack of talent that the profession is losing. For people who are in employment, access to employment has been equally difficult. I've heard instances of people making over 100 applications before they actually get an interview. And that's not a role, that's just an interview. And then we've seen that the 2018 and 2020 AJ Race and Diversity surveys have highlighted inequality and racism within the profession, with 25% of minority architects, Black and minority architects, stating that they've experienced racism and disadvantage in the workplace. So this existing context, there wasn't always an awareness of it by the wider population. It's been over 30 years since the Society of Black Architects raised issues like this, but it's been ongoing for a long time. So how has COVID impacted? We look at the wider community, COVID just exacerbated what was already a situation of disadvantage and inequality. When we look at mortality, there were more people from the Black and minority community who died, to a higher mortality rate, and this is linked to their roles, public facing in the healthcare sector, in the transport sector, but also we can't disregard the lack of PPE initially. And we heard that some of those who raised an issue about this were disciplined for raising it as an issue, so leadership didn't quite understand. But also in terms of employment, people are less likely to be able to undertake their roles at home and may have been furloughed or lost their job even, which is less income for them. For people who were at home during the lockdown, with people living in largely flats without garden, this was really quite more stressful for them, having to stay in this sort of accommodation during the pandemic. For people the students who were trying to learn at home and school pupils, they didn't always have access to computers and broadband. And so we see that the impact on the Black community was more severe in many instances and regards. Looking at architecture more specifically, we know that our sector is always impacted by any downturn in the economy that happened during COVID. And so lots of projects were halted or paused. People were either working from home or furloughed. Some even lost their jobs, and more jobs are still being lost in the sector. So with a situation where people had difficulties getting employment, it's going to be even more difficult for practices. We know that there was a petition which was raised just to ensure that Black and other minority practices are not adversely disadvantaged by COVID. We know that now with the Black Lives Matters movement, that there's greater awareness, but how will this translate into action? I feel that the action that needs to be undertaken has to be well considered and strategic, not just a knee-jerk reaction. It needs to reflect an understanding of what the issues are and the barriers which are faced, and have multifaceted policies which address all of these actions. But it's not just about policy, it's also about behaviors, because we know policies have been around for a little while. Not just also about behaviors, probably also about monitoring, because if these policies are put in place, it needs to be reviewed to see that they are actually being implemented, and that if there's a need to alter or change them to get the desired outcome, then that actually occurs. So we are at the crossroads at the current time, and proactive and sustainable action needs to be taken.
Thank you so much, Teri. Now we'll now have Roy's presentation, and after that we'll have our Q&A. If you'll just bear with me a moment.
Hello, my name is Roy MacPepple. I'm an architect, strategic leader in the country for building more MMC homes. And also I'm passionate about alleviating homelessness, also with social values and procurement, using the Social Value Act 2012. And really why I've come onto this show, or we'll call it an event, is to explain the opportunities that we have since Corona, or before Corona, since Corona, and what we're probably going to have after. In the past, I'm a family person working in my practice, semi-retired, but also just dabbling in when it comes to healthy lifestyle. But once Corona came, and the fact that it was affecting the BAME community so much, I now take regular exercise, spend time with my family more. My son and I, we sometimes go for cycling or for a walk, and I try to jog on a daily basis whenever possible. But yeah, just really understanding the mortality that we have now, and it begins to quicken the mind to think what we need to do to stay as fit as possible, just in case, God forbid. And also pressing into my faith as well. I'm a man of faith. What I think is happening in the present, though, is that it's allowed me to do something I've always wanted to do, which is have virtual meetings, and now I can get people into spaces that I probably would never have got before, because they're from all over the country and sometimes internationally as well for virtual meetings. Also, what's happened there is that I've been able to look at what I'm trying to do and make a change and make a difference for alleviating homelessness and social values. I founded NHPDC, which is National Housing Place Delivery Consortium, which is a think tank stroke consortium that really looks at tackling and providing best practice modern method of construction affordable homes in this country. And we have award-winning planners, architects, MMC manufacturers and developers, as well as government procurement leads on our panel. And we come together regularly just to see what's happening in the industry, but also how we can dispel myths in the industry about modern methods of construction and introduce people to the different systems, because many people think MMC or precision manufacturing or off-site manufacturing is simply volumetric systems, but it's not. There's 7 different categories, and there's iterations within those categories that people should know about. And sometimes people have used the systems and blamed the system rather than the site that they put on, which wasn't appropriate for the system. So we help to kind of dispel that and put people in the right position, especially local authorities, so that they can make the right decisions for using MMC, which is really the future. What I also encourage, and I'm doing, is writing a book, and that's the Best Practice MMC book, whereby it was interesting doing the research for the book. I discovered that the BAME community is oversubscribed in social housing, and I probably thought it was the other way, but it's oversubscribed. So now with the new government starter homes, I'll be looking at more so forming an organisation which will provide affordable homes that BAME community can purchase, and also elderly people's home that also they can potentially purchase that are affordable. And it's not, it'll have a mix of other groups, but it will be targeted towards the BAME community because we're seriously undersubscribed when it comes to home ownership today and with our younger people. Yeah, moving forward to the future, I do think that an organisation needs to be formed that has the expertise to implement this movement. It could be as a housing association or a special purpose vehicle. I think amongst us, we've got the expertise, we've got the knowledge, we've got the experience for many, many years. And that group, I believe, once it's formed, it can seek funding from the GLA, Homes England, it can seek land from the GLA in London, but also Homes England around the country, and also from REITs, real estate investment funds. Typical one would be something like the church. They have land, and it could be Pentecostal churches, and they even have their own banking institutions. So we could approach those, or that organisation can approach those and do some, form an SPV, special purpose vehicle, and they can then look at properties that they own, which are, let's say, poor assets, that they can build a new church and probably flats with that, and that brings that asset back to life and gives it value. And then once that established, teach others to do it around the country. So I think during COVID, there obviously with deaths and the like, it's been sad and it's been frightening to some degree. But with my faith, I believe, you know, that these things do happen, but it's a wake-up call for all of us to realise that we need to understand what our purpose is, add value to people and organisations, and grow. So thank you, and I'll speak to you soon. And any questions, you can ask them after.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Roy and Teri. Thank you so much. Now, we'd like to start the Q&A. We've got some initial set questions. If you have got a question, what we'd like you to do is to type it into the chat, and we will put it to both of our panelists. The first question comes from Rose Lewis, who's head of strategy at Croydon. And it's patients from BAME are twice as likely as white patients to live in areas of housing deprivation. They are also twice as likely to present with more severe coronavirus symptoms and to be admitted to intensive care units. What short and long-term strategies can be put in place to help improve and mitigate the impact on the Black and BAME community? And I'll go to you first, Teri.
Okay, I know that from my experience of being on the board of an NHS organization, that Black and minority people have poor health situations, and they have underlying issues, be it diabetes, and these are not always addressed. I know that sometimes there are some targeted policies, so these are things which can be done in the short term to advise people about their diets and exercise. So those sort of things can assist. And I know that with COVID, we've heard that something like vitamin D assist. But also we need to engage more about issues to do with our health, because I know that when I was on the NHS board, whenever there were engagement events, we were underrepresented, whereas the majority group were there making their voices heard and looking to ensure that the new programs addressed their needs. In the longer term, we know that health and housing are interrelated, and so you cannot really improve health that much. You can do that to some extent, but if people are in poor housing with without the ability to exercise, housing which is damp, then that's going to impact their health. And most of the housing, we know that with a low income, most people are having to depend a lot on local authority for housing. And so we need to see how local authority can start to improve their housing stock, because even though the new housing is of a good standard, most people are living in older housing, and that the quantity of older housing is going to be the majority for a long time to come. We also have to realize that not all people are in local authority housing. Some of them are in rented housing. And so how can landlords be assisted, maybe to be aware of, grants for insulation and things like that. But at the end of the day, any strategy which we implement needs to be joined up. So whatever is put in place for housing has to be linked to health. And also we're able to get the word out about these opportunities so people can actually benefit from them, the opportunities that exist, as well as any new strategy that needs to be put in place.
Well, thank you, Teri. And you, Roy, what's your view?
I chime with what Teri said, but strategically wise, there's something that is around now, literally now. It's called the Planning for the Future white paper. It's a consultation document, which initially was going to finish on the 15th of October, which is today. It started on the 6th of August, but it's been extended to, I think, the 29th of October. And what's been said in that document is that one of the key areas that we can have an effect is with the local plan. Approximately 50% of local authorities have a local plan, and those plans last for 5 years. And it takes approximately 5 years to make a local plan. So as you finish one, based on the time frame it takes now, it's out of date by the time it's finished. But the government, the Ministry of Housing, a local community has a document out there right now that needs our consultation. It's what I call it's a once in a generation opportunity for us to make our voices heard. And I'm responding with a group of people to share that, I want us to have people who look like us, Black and minorities, in developing those local plans, some of us heading that process, so that when we are speaking to local people, we understand where they're coming from, because it tends to not be our own people discussing with our people in areas where we have a majority or a very substantial number of our people in those communities, and we are not being heard. So everybody on this platform, go onto the government site regarding planning for the future and have your say. And it will cover health, it will cover employment, it should cover diversity, which is something I'm really picking up on, diversity, equality, and inclusiveness. And if your local plan is not doing that, this is the time to say it needs to. And if you have to, you be the voice. So that is a great, great strategic opportunity that exists right now. And if we miss it, generations will ask us, what did we do about it when we had the opportunity? Also, when it comes to housing, very, very important. I mean, that's the area that I work in as the National Housing and Places Delivery Consortium. We look at building quality homes, beautiful homes in places people choose to live and work and play. So that again, with the social housing aspects of it, the government has asked us to build in this country 300,000 new homes per year. And out of that, approximately 200,000 are built. And we have a shortfall every year of 100,000 homes not being built. And most of those homes, 70% of them are social, in other words, council housing, and affordable homes that are not being built. So there's a massive mandate there to make up that gap, because a lot of us, when you look at statistics, Black and minorities have Blacks in particular have a very high proportion of people who live in council housing. And what I'm asking as well is for, as I said before, is for us to be made aware of the schemes for shared ownership, for first-time buy, for starter homes. So we are made aware of this, so that the statistics that show that Black people have more than 50% of our people living in social housing, and only 32% of a group of people that has private ownership, in comparison to the whites of 68% and Indians of 74%. So for us, we need to really get involved on a strategic level as well as on a local level.
Oh, great, thanks very much. Well, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point about you know, people who look like us participating in many of these reforms, which brings me to the question is, how can architects help in this matter? This is a question from Sumita Singha. What practical and professional help can we give? Because I think oftentimes when you see these regeneration projects, again, people that look like us are not being involved in those processes. What's your take, Teri?
Okay, I mean, there are different ways architects can be engaged. We can be engaged in the delivery to be some of the consultants who are delivering that. And if our practices are not large enough, then we can partner with some of the larger practices in the delivery. We could also engage by supporting those who are engaged with to ensure that their voices are truly heard. We can also be involved in those who are obtaining training to have opportunities to get experience on those type of projects. And also we can be engaged by also ensuring that our profession is lobbied so that practices are doing the right thing, and when they go on projects like this, and that they're diverse as well. So there's ways in which we can be engaged. And what I also wanted to just highlight, because I heard Roy talking about opportunities, for those who may be resident in Hackney, there is an opportunity for self-build in Hackney, which is open at the moment, where any Hackney resident can actually bid for a site which Hackney have available. So people who are bidding for that could be supported by an architect, because you need to put some technical information. So you could assist someone if you don't have the funding. You could work with someone to bid for that and be the one who benefits from that opportunity as well. Yeah.
Roy, what would you add to that?
I mean, as an architect, who's a pragmatic architect, the key thing for me is to listen to your clients, but it's to get the opportunities in the first place. And I then err towards the government. I err towards legislation, to know the legislation, and I will then preempt something which is the Social Value Act 2012. And how that act worked is every public organization should not be discriminating against protected areas of community. And that is race, that is women, that is sexuality, we're talking age, etc. There's 9 areas, disabilities. Now, if they are, those organizations, those public organizations should be brought to account. And how it should be, and this Planning Act also I've put in a response to, regarding the Social Values Act, which comes out of the Equalities Act 2010, Equalities Act 2010, where the same categories are protected in that sense. Now, all we're asking for is a level playing field, so we can partake of the big cake that is being shared out, not having to work with the crumbs. So if a local authority is not showing that level of diligence to look at its community and then have contractors and architects, we're specifically talking about architects, but is any discipline really that has a service to offer to a public organization, it should be monitored. It should be, the work should be delivered out equally. And with architects, it's really just to be as professional as you possibly can, because what tends to happen is that, in a sense, you don't get your first project that you make your profit. It's the repeat projects that you make your money with. And if you come across and you are diligent and you're working hard doing what you should be doing, and whether you're winning awards, whether your community engagement is really up there, that people can understand what you're proposing and how you propose to deliver it, then there's lots of opportunities that should come your way. But the key thing is to get the opportunity to get in there in the first place. And we should be lobbying based on the significant Black community within various boroughs, both in London and around the major cities, to get a proportion of that work based on our proportion of ethnicity within those boroughs.
Well, thank you for that, Roy. But I mean, I think if we look at an example that is recent, for example, the Southwark bid, which was allocating 100 million worth of projects, and there was not one Black-led practice that was appointed at the final outcome, and it hasn't been rerun or any adjustments made. I mean, what are the ways in which, how do we make any inroads when we're facing that on a regular basis? And because there are systems in place to ensure that these things stay the way they are. So anything that we do has to be consciously dismantling some of these gatekeepers in order for there to be entry for people like us. How can we do that, say with your Social Values Act? I mean, because these things are often ignored. I'd like to know. I mean, maybe I should go to you, Teri, because Roy, you were speaking to now.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Southwark one is one which was just so glaring, and people didn't just sit back and accept it. Architects were vocal. There was an article or two in the AJ, and I even commented on that. And as a result of that, even though it appears nothing is happening, Southwark is actually going to run another procurement process later in the year. So people are listening, and we shouldn't just sit back and do nothing. We need to call out poor performance, and local authorities are now really consider the inclusion and their brand and how they're perceived, and they do take action. So we just need to be vocal.
Yes, I think that's a good one. What was your view on that? I mean, did you have any involvement in that, Southwark?
The thing is that organizations do not always realize the bias in their processes. And the processes, because they come from the large, organization perspective, the majority perspective, they consider that, yes, we've looked at it and it's going to be inclusive, but actually you need to review all of your practices and processes, and also review the outcome, because if the outcome is not what you want, then the processes are not acting, and you need to revise them. So it's not just about having the policies in place, it's about monitoring what the outcome is. And I think people are doing that, or going to be more aware of that. You can't sit back and say, oh yes, I have the policies and they didn't work. If they didn't work, they're not good enough.
Quite. Roy?
I really confirm and agree with what Teri said. One of the key areas that we've got is that is bias. I mean, one of the key failures we have is bias, and just as Teri said, and we saw it recently with the BT. I mean, everybody watched, it went viral, I'm sure. BT were trying to promote Black History Month, and David Hay, a multiple world champion, was sitting beside a commentator, and he said, oh, someone very qualified to discuss this, and we appreciate Black History Month, is another co-commentator who was a white bald man who David Hay was shocked to say, I'm here and I can't even talk about Black History Month. And that was just a travesty, because it tells you the level of mindset people have with bias. And something I will encourage anybody who's listening here, or anybody who works with someone in HR, especially those who lead their diversity, inclusion and equality section, to encourage your organizations to add in your interviewing, in your employment, in your retention and promotion, the IAT, which is Implicit Association Test. It's a simple test by Harvard University, and you can go on it, Google it, IAT test, Harvard. And what it does, it just identifies the level of bias you have towards your own, against your own, whether it's, because bias works like this, I think.
is that you've been brought up and you've grown up with people that you recognize and know. And if in a white environment, they're the people you recognize and know. So when a person comes for an interview and they're from another culture or another ethnicity, because you're not familiar with them and there's a job opportunity that comes, you tend to choose the person you know. And you don't think there's anything wrong with that, because as far as you're concerned, that's the best person for the job, even if the black person was slightly better. So what the implicit association test does is identifies that bias. And if it's on the extreme, in other words, you're an out-and-out racist. If it's on the to be retrained, you need, because it will come up to your HR, they'll know it, and they say, well, what we need to do is retrain you so you're more balanced in your judgment, because in a professional environment, you shouldn't have bias making your decisions, because it's probably not the best decision for the organization. So the intention is that these tests, which I do run, the hashtag take the IAT test as one of the things I put in most communications on my LinkedIn, and also now it's going on to my Instagram, so that it's from boardroom right the way to the front line. So if a director is well extreme on the bias, he needs to be retrained. And if he doesn't pass, retrain him until you get to a point with your policies and your procedures that if they don't improve under that procedure, they're gone.
Right.
Literally, they have got, because you're going to give them opportunities. It might be 3 strikes and out. You're trying to retrain them. It's not, everything white is good and everything black is bad. And that's the extremities what I'm talking about. It should be, a bit of grey in there. And then you bring them to the point that in their professional environment, they cannot afford to be biased. But in their home environment, you don't care what they do. That's their private business. So yeah. That's the thing, is to get those people to begin to think in an unbiased way, so that when they look at us, they don't see the negative all the time of, oh, right, I still get it. I walk past the white person. I'm not going to steal your mug, you sweetheart. And a young boy was telling me recently, he's going to Stanford University right now, and he said he was fine until he turned 13, and from that cute little boy, sometimes he became a potential mugger, because our boys dressed in the street. But he said the perception of him changed completely. And he's at Harvard, and he was at the Royal School of Music. And he's done so much, this young man, and achieved so much. But as far as they're concerned, he's just a black man who could be a villain. So bias has to change. We have to change the way people conduct themselves through bias in a professional environment. Don't have any problem what they do privately, but professionally, it has to change.
Well, it'd be interesting to know how widely this IAT test is, is shared amongst institutions, because obviously that sounds to me like something really key that could be a help, because in the reverse, what tends to happen, isn't it, is that we all have a talk with our children, especially the young black men, about how they should conduct themselves and move around, the city, so that they don't get targeted and things like that. But then let me bring us on to something else, which is about, which is going to touch on the issue of modern methods of construction. I think typically a lot of Black and ethnic architects have made their way in the professions here by in some way either circumventing the system or finding a niche which they which has been ignored or is not being worked on, and being able to slot themselves in there to get the business. So if we think about modern methods of construction, how do you think that this will help, for example, the Black and ethnic communities? Because definitely, as there's a serious housing shortage and we need more housing built quicker and faster, but to higher quality, how are we going to do that? Teri.
Okay, the thing about modern methods of construction is that obviously it's a wide range, but it takes some of the risk away, because some element of the design and construction is being done outside of the site context. So if people were coming together to maybe undertake a development, maybe has a group of people who were looking to acquire land, or maybe even people who wanted to go into development, then some of that risk is taken away, and they're able to have greater certainty when they're putting together their proposal or their bids or their funding, to sort of say, we're not going to have the same level of risk as you'd have on a traditional project, because we're able to procure some of these. And I mean, it also goes from, you know, having an element of the MMC to actually having the whole thing coming on site, where you're just putting the foundation base and the complete thing is erected there. So it does give new possibilities, but people also need to get the knowledge of what the different MMCs are, and where they can find their niche, and what may be suitable for the project which they're undertaking. We need to build our skills and knowledge in this area.
Yeah. Roy?
Fantastic. Yeah, Teri, I might have to give you some of my job right now, but I've just finished a lecture on modern methods of construction for inviting all the East London local authorities. It's sponsored by the GLA. I mean, it is my area of expertise. I've been in and around it for the last 4 or 5 years. And what I did primarily is that, as a person who worked in the local authority at a very senior level, I was very strategic when I was planning to retire from local authorities and go into my consultancy. I literally met most types of modern methods of construction companies. So in modern methods of construction, there's 7 different categories. Most people think it's all the volumetric, and as I said before, but you have panelized systems, you have 3D printers now that are coming into the market, you've got SIP systems, which is a structural, integrated structural systems. So there's 7 different categories, but the key for the architectural profession is to get to know what modern methods of construction's options they are, because a lot of local authorities, and I was speaking to local authorities just now before this meeting, they don't know. And what I was able to do and be successful doing, because over the years I've built something like 5,000 new homes, or had built, raised £250 million through GLA, Home England and others. But more so, I've been able to put a pipeline together for a local authority. We built no new homes initially, and now it's looking at 2,000 new homes using modern methods of construction in the specifications and through the procurement system. And also on top of that, that particular local authority now has a £1.6 billion framework using modern methods of construction, not just for housing, we've also got schools in there. And that framework is a dynamic framework. In other words, if you've got people on that framework that are not up to scratch, you can add people to it. And that's consultants as well as manufacturers. So we need to get an advantage. Everybody on my lecture earlier on, they have a massive advantage, because the lectures I'm giving is in 3 stages over 3 days, over 2 weeks. They are now being considered as part of the book as a built environment MA. So for me, it's so important for us as BAMA, as Black and minority groups, to know what this is, because 2 key things you need to know: the different systems, but also the use of BIM. Building information modeling is key for modern methods of construction, and traditional builders don't really use as much BIM as modern methods of construction do, because modern methods of construction relies on building information modeling. And what I've done with specifications in and around local authorities is make sure that we do not employ consultants who are not BIM compliant. So you need to make sure that you become BIM compliant. And I'm not saying that restricts you as far as work is concerned. What it means is that before you go for those projects and tender for those projects, you need to have someone alongside you that you can partner with who is BIM compliant, so that you have a chance to win those types of projects. So yeah, so MMC, it's coming. As I said before, we are looking at 300,000 homes has been asked this year. and why we're looking at modern maximalist construction as the way to build mainly affordable, social and affordable housing, is that there's a remit that we have that out of the 300,000 homes, we are short of 100,000 homes every year. And over the last 10 years, that's 1 million social or affordable homes that haven't been built. And the only way we can make up that shortfall, which creates a 40 billion pounds per year income to this country once it gets up to that level, is through modern methods of construction. So it's a massive opportunity. You need to talk to people like myself, obviously, who's seasoned in procuring it and doing it. My organisation, the leadership as a value, we're 23 billion pounds as a leadership value. So we're really making some inroads to make the difference, to change how people are building social and affordable housing. And it's not for changing it for just the sake of it, it's because it's the only way, based on skill shortages happening. Skill shortages in this country costs us 6.8 billion pounds every year. So the government and I speak, and we're discussing how best we're going to be able to address this, and MMC is the answer. So you architects and you people in the construction sector, you need to be aware, and I'm doing my best through the book and other things to make you aware. So all the best with that. Yeah, great.
Well, I think that brings me on to a very obvious question, which is really, if there's a skill shortage and then there's massive unemployment of young Black and ethnic construction professionals, what would you say to a young, say, Black architect, engineer, surveyor, about what they need to do to be able to have access to some of this work? Teri.
Okay, I think the first thing is trying as best as you can to get some experience, and also to know where the opportunities are to get experience, and also where the vacancies are as well. Because time and time again, I have people who are applying for a part 1 or even a part 2 role who never had an experience in an architect's office. And so you really need to start young, for when you're thinking you want a career in architecture, to get work experience, because that work experience is a link which you can plug into later on. And I know that people don't always know an architect, but it's just pressing your school to ensure you get that. It's also knowing where opportunities have been advertised, because we know in our sector, a lot of it is word of mouth. People may not be, people may use something like the RIBA, their own in-house practice for recruiting, but there's also something like the Construction Leadership Council, who have got a talent portal where lots of employers advertise roles and people can upload their CVs. And also even on LinkedIn, I know that sometimes they highlight the large number of vacancies for which they're recruiting. So it's a sort of different range of things you have to undertake. You have to be proactive. You can't wait, for it to come to you. You have to go out and talk to people to find out where those opportunities are.
And in this COVID time, I need you to address that, because we're in a time when we can't really move around.
Yeah. So in this COVID time, even if there is no roles, sometimes you have to make your own opportunities. Yes. Because even at the time of COVID, there's still opportunities. There's also things like learning, which may be relevant for when you want to go back into architecture. So there's some related fields where people may still be recruiting. Now may be a time where you're improving your learning and experience. We've heard about MMC. What do you know about MMC? If you use this opportunity to increase your experience, to learn more about BIM, your Revit and things like that, that stands you in a better position. But you've got to really use the networks, because a few opportunities which are out there may not be advertised publicly. So you need to go and just be creative in how you seek those opportunities, and really don't give up. I see so many talent who leave the profession, which is such a shame. So just find a way, make a nuisance of yourself, whatever you have to do to get those opportunities.
Thanks, Teri. Roy.
Yes, exactly what Teri says. It's you need to maximize your network. I tell my children, your network is your net worth, and they use it to big time. They are so networked. I mean, on LinkedIn, I think if you check my LinkedIn, I'm something like 18,700 on LinkedIn alone, and most of them are senior managers and executives and directors. And if I need anything or want anything, or I just need to put out something in the name of someone that I know, and they come back. But what I would say is really build up your LinkedIn in such a positive way, particularly you do not have to reinvent the wheel with LinkedIn. You can look at other people who've done similar things to you and how they put the wording across, that you can top and tail yours so that you come across as dynamic, as hungry, as keen, as what needs to be done. So that when you are out there, and now LinkedIn has something which, if you're looking for work, you can ring it and say looking for work. But for me, on a professional level, LinkedIn is one of the best things that's ever happened. And with Corona, it's even better because you can get in touch with anybody, literally anybody you need, based on, and how the system works is based on asking for a connection or a message. You click on that, and then you get 300 letters to sell yourself. Literally 300 letters to sell yourself. And it's usually, hi, my name's so-and-so, I'm passionate about, and it's not about your profession. Getting job work is 80% soft skills. It's only 20% qualification. And if you don't know this, write it down. Becoming employed is 80% soft skills, and it's 20% your profession and or your qualifications. And how that works is this: when I'm looking to employ executives, I don't look at their qualifications. I know they're qualified. I work it this way: if I had this executive beside me, and we were stuck at an airport with a delay of 4 hours. Can I work with this person, or would I be comfortable being delayed for 4 hours with this person? Because I know they're qualified. And the key decision making is based on their soft skills. What are their extracurricular activities? What do they do? That is the decision maker. And an example I'll give you of this is a very large bank, and a friend of ours in a very large bank, they had 3 top candidates who got right through to the end stage of their engagement. And the decision, they chose one of them because his hobby was wine tasting. And guess why they employed him? Because they like to go for a drink in the city, and they wanted him to help them to choose the right wines. That is so bizarre, but I'm not saying he wasn't qualified to do the job, but that was the difference, because of the soft skills he had was why they employed them. So your soft skills, your voluntary work, things that you're passionate about are what's going to also add to get you the jobs, not necessarily your qualification. There's many people who have had first-class degrees, they're still unemployed today. It's the soft skills that get it. And your network, as you work your network, you will be fine big time, but you need to work it.
Thanks, Roy. Well, I've got one more question. We've just coming close to the end. A couple of comments. One is that Smita wants you to run the LinkedIn thing again. But before you do that, I've got quite a long question here. Many Black children and young people are not introduced to architecture or construction professions until much later, or not at all. Do you think outreach to young Black people or children would be part of the solution to the lack of diversity and inclusion in the industry? So I need you to use this question to kind of round up. So if I go to you, Teri, please.
Yeah, I think it's important for those who are already in the profession to do our outreach work, because I volunteer with different organizations where I go into schools to talk to people, and it's important that they can see people who look like themselves going into those professions. And also it means that if they're thinking of going into that profession, they remember there was that person who came to my school. The school can put them in touch with me again, because we know that many Black people do not have that network, and a lot of people who have gone into architecture are people because they have relatives. I mean, my father was an architect, which is why I knew about the profession. But for those who don't know about the profession, we who are in it have to go out and make ourselves visible as positive role models in the community.
Thank you very much for that, Teri. Roy, if you could round up and also give your LinkedIn thing, I think, on the 300 letters. I think that's what Sumita's after.
Okay. All right, rounding up, it's similar to Teri. We need to make ourselves known to our community. I'm a HDN Housing Diversity Network London and South East England advisor, where we support middle managers in the housing sector to become executives, and we do that through mentoring. I'm also a GLA Lean advisor, which is London Enterprise Advisory Network, where I use my network to go into sixth forms and technical colleges or colleges in general to teach them about BIM and also MMC, so that they can arrange to go to sites with us and get to have a look at what MMC is, especially in the factories. So it's really us in the profession sharing our knowledge, and these are inner city colleges, and the majority of them are Black and ethnic minorities, so that they get to see, again, a familiar face, successful people that we can say, look, this is what our journey, and in talking about our journey for that particular college, I just did on yesterday their Black History Month presentation, and we covered, you know, our history from Egypt right the way through to the various fantastic things Black people have done in this country to create what we have in the 21st century, such as mobile phones. It was a Black man who invented it. Such as sat-nav, it was a Black woman who invented it. Such as WhatsApp is it Skype? It was a Black woman who invented that, just to really let them know that we have been here and we're part of this and part of the success of the Western society. But so we shouldn't lose the fact that we also have a face. And what I'm doing as a national advisor is making sure that I don't miss those people who are passionate also about building new homes, who are Black and BAME. So very important that we give back as we have got. Now, going towards the LinkedIn, very important, how you do with what you do with LinkedIn, and how I will help you all build your network. If there's anybody in the world you want to contact, just get their name. That's your first thing. Get their name. If it's an architectural firm and you want to contact one of the heads or the directors, get the name. Once you get the name, you put the name into LinkedIn, they will profile primarily, generally will come up. There may be a few not on, but most are. And once theirs come up, you have the option of sending them a message. And when you click on it, it's a personal message. And that personal message gives you 300 characters so that you can send the type of message that you need to impact them, to engage them, so that they will connect with you. Because once they see that message and they say, yeah, this is someone I want to engage with, because it will ask them, would you accept or ignore this invitation to connect? And once they accept, then you've got an open opportunity to really engage them through whatever you need. But realize they will only accept you once they've read your profile and then you meet what they need. So if you utilize that at whatever stage you are with LinkedIn, you then can make contact with the best and the greatest and the largest organizations in the world, so that it benefits you and you grow your network.
Well, I think, you know, I'm glad to hear you say that, because this is really the reason why we've set up Let's Build and Let's Talk. And that was to be able to really promote Black and ethnic professionals who are already working and who are in senior positions in the UK construction industry. Because a lot of the time, these people are invisible. This group is invisible. They may be part of a large European organization or in the government or in some other area. And, you know, I've had, you know, young part one and part two architects saying when they started, they didn't know of any African or ethnic architects or people that they could look up to. And I think role models are important for all of us, you know, regardless of our gender or our race. And, you know, Dawn is sharing with us that, you know, she was always often the only Black person in a meeting. Well, certainly that has been my experience throughout my career. In fact, not just my career, but even through university. At university, I was the only Black girl in the class from the first year right through to the sixth year. And it's simply carried on into the working life, where I've always been the only, you know, usually the only woman in the room, and then the only Black woman in person in the room, making some of these decisions. And we do need to change that. And we have a fantastic opportunity now, because when people like Teri and Sumita and myself were all studying, we were very, very few. Now the younger ones coming up, there are in much greater numbers, but it's not seen, and they are struggling to make headway and get the experience that they need in order to really be able to participate in the development of this great country. So I'd like to say thank you to all of you for attending today. I'd like to be able to include, to have some of you on as panelists at future events. I see Roy there, who I haven't seen for a long time, from the old days at Cush. Hi, but you know, we need you all to participate. Please send me messages if you're interested in being a panelist. The more that we can put the message out, the more that we can celebrate our unsung heroes, if you like, then the better I think it'll be for our community as a whole. Thank you for attending. Thank you to Teri and to Roy for a very riveting, very informative discussion today, and have a blessed day. Thank you all for attending. And I see my mother's here as well. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.